Welcome to the FBC Midlothian podcast. We hope today's message will speak to your heart and draw you closer to God. To find out more, visit us on the web at www.fbcmidlothian.org.
I'm getting married. Oh, I can't even believe I'm saying that. We're not officially engaged yet, but it's pretty much a done deal. I mean, I've always had this feeling like I had this missing piece of myself, almost like a hole in my heart, but I finally found the guy that can fill it. I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I've dreamed about getting married, having kids, raising a family, and all the wonderful things that come along with that. I have no doubt in my mind, he is the one for me. He's the one that's gonna make me happy. I just keep dreaming about our wedding day. It's going to be perfect. I will be so happy when...
It's over. It started off great. We had a lot of fun in the beginning. I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the way, we stopped having fun. I stopped having fun. He doesn't seem to care. As a matter of fact, if you ask him, he'd say, "We're fine, it's good." Which is amazing to me because there's no life, no spark. I'm totally bored. He's totally clueless. It's like he's sucking the life out of me and I've got to get out. I'm ready to be on my own, live life, have fun, be happy. I can't do that with him. So I'm done, because I'll be happy when
I get that promotion. Man, it's so close I can feel it. This is what I've worked my tail off for 12 years. I deserve this. Man, with this promotion, I'll finally have the life. We can get the new car, go on vacations, start looking at that dream house we've always talked about. The life. You know, I know it sounds cliche, but this is it. Money will make me happy. My wife, my kids, we'll all be happy when
I slow down. I got the job I wanted. We've got the house, we've got the cars, everything we need. And I'm tired. I don't even know my kids. They don't know me. It's always work. We just need to slow down. I could get rid of all of it. I could care less anymore. I could downsize, get a used car, let people judge me. I don't care. I'll be so happy when life is just simple.
I'll be happy when I get married.
I'll be so happy when I get that promotion.
I'll be happy when I get a divorce.
I'll be happy when life is just simple.
We all want a great life. Every single one of us, we want a great life. We just don't know what that looks like. For some people, it looks like it's a new relationship. And we think if we can just have the right person in our life, then that will pour into us everything we want. For some of us, we just want freedom. We want separation. We want space. For some of us, we want that next symbol of success. We want that next great promotion, that next level of income. And for some of us, we want to take all that out of there. We want to see things simplified. We're so exhausted. We've run it up as high as we can run it. We want so much to find relief and change. We all want a great life. And it's not that we're selfish. It's that we are born and designed to pursue the best. We're driven by that. And there is a way to look at life and say, this is good, but what is that exactly? How does that look? What component parts would be part of a life where we really could look at life and say, this is great? Could we recognize it if we saw it? And how do we get it? Well, this morning I want to talk to you about that and begin a journey called Building a Great Life. And if you're going to build a great life, it's all going to start with a foundation. Friends, we think about foundations now, and we think about these concrete slabs that we build houses on. Many of you have been in that process. In fact, one of the reasons we wanted you to update your contact information is a lot of you have been moving and shifting and going to different places. We think of that big slab of concrete. They pour it, and you walk out on that the first time, you think, gosh, this doesn't look very big. And then they put the walls on it, and you go, how am I going to keep up with this much house? Same thing with a yard. You think, well, this would be great until you see how much of it you're going to have to mow. And suddenly you're going, whoa, what was I thinking? In the ancient world, they built houses not with these slabs of concrete, but they built courses of walls out of stone. In fact, most of the stone was different size, different shape, different color. The artwork you have on your program today kind of reflects that. You see all those different pieces oddly really fitting together with each other. But they didn't use a slab foundation. They used cornerstones. They'd start with a cornerstone, and it was a piece of bedrock that had been carved and chipped away to create the starting point. And they'd put that cornerstone in a particular place at a particular angle because everything else is going to be built connected to it or on top of it. It was the most important part. If you didn't get the cornerstone right, nothing else would work. And so if you're going to build a great life, you also have to think about making sure you've chosen the right foundation for that life or the right cornerstone for that life. Over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about the different component parts. Today, I just want to talk to you about your starting point. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to the 7th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, very first Gospel in the New Testament. Jesus is going to lay out what he says is that cornerstone for your great life. And if you don't want a great life, there's something wrong with you. It's just a typical human response to say, I can have the worst or I can have the best. Only somebody crazy and sick wouldn't choose the best. It's not just selfishness. It is nature at work in you. And when Jesus came, he offered to us and said his plan was for us to have life, and this is how he described it, and have it abundantly. What does that look like? Well, Jesus comes along in the 7th chapter of Matthew, and he begins to lay out what is the foundation for that great life. I want you to read this with me. This is verse 24 of chapter 7. He says, anyone who listens to my teaching and obeys me is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents, and the floodwaters rise, and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse, because it's built on rock. But anyone who hears my teaching and ignores it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come, and the winds beat against that house, it will fall with a mighty crash. Let's be honest with each other. Some days of life are really, really good, and we miss it. We don't recognize it when it's there. And there are days that are so hard, we cannot imagine how we get through them. In fact, we can't imagine it to such an extent that we tend to live in a form of denial. We'll say, tragedy comes to somebody else. That'll never happen to me. That's going to happen to somebody else. That's the reason why most families don't have an emergency fund. That's the reason why most Americans today have way too little saved for retirement. That's why we are in such debt. That's why we aren't prepared emotionally when we get the news that tells us our lives are about to change. We think it'll happen to somebody else. I had a friend named Jeff, and Jeff, every time you saw him, he had his hand in his pocket, and every once in a while he'd pull it out and he'd pop this little package, and it was Tums. He swallowed Tums like they were candy, and at first, when I first met him and started seeing this, I thought it was that he had bad breath, and he was just kind of popping mints, but it was Tums. And I started noticing that we'd eat a meal, and pretty soon the Tums would come out, and he never looked terribly miserable, but he never really looked comfortable. Jeff had been having Tums so long that when he finally gave up and went to the doctor said, man, you've got these streaks all over your system. Have you been eating antacids? He goes, yeah. Often? Well, how would you define often? Like, how many times a day would often be? Okay, I think I see where we're headed this. The doctor was a friend of mine, mutual friend. So Jeff told me that in that moment, the doctor said, here's the deal. You have a diseased part of your body, and we need to take it out. That's the only way that's going to solve this. So we're going to have a laparoscopic surgery, and we need to schedule it soon, and you're going to get relief, but we've got to deal with this surgically. Jeff said, I'd never been sick. I'd never been in the hospital. I'd never had surgery. And frankly, I never thought it would happen to me. And so I sat on that table, that exam table, and I was in a daze. Jeff, did you hear me? Yeah, I can't believe it. And so the doctor gets up in his face. He goes, what's wrong? You too good to be sick? Jeff said that just was like a knife in the gut until he started thinking about it. And he said, you know what? I really was. I thought those kinds of things happen to people who don't take care of themselves, but I work out. Those kinds of things happen to people who aren't real smart, but I feel like I try to watch my life. That kind of stuff happens because people make mistakes. And on it went. He said, I started realizing I had set myself up because I thought people like me don't have tragedy. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, we would bury his dad. He would see unemployment in his brother. He would have a health crisis. And suddenly he realized, I've been assuming all this time it would happen to somebody else. Friends, a great life doesn't just happen. A great life comes and it's built on choices. And the most important, crucial choice you'll ever make is who will decide and define what a great life is for you. Will you let your culture define that? And if you do, then you will find a lot in common with these 4 characters we saw today. Or will you decide that there's somebody who has an inside track on how life was designed to work and trust his opinion? That's really where you find Jesus. Jesus is coming before people saying, I want to give you the abundant life. I want you to experience life as it was designed. But here's the way that's going to happen. You need to listen to me and you need to put into practice these things that I teach you, he said. Now here's the deal. When you do that, he says, you're able to withstand the hardest stuff. You're able to withstand the worst days. You're probably able to recognize the good days. I'll never forget one day Kelly was in the car with me, and I think I've told you this story before, but we were on vacation. Our kids were little, and we had just finished this great week, and she just reached across the console of the truck, and she took my hand. She says, you do realize these are the best days. Our kids are still young enough that they want to be with us, but they're old enough that they're easy. And it was like this signpost for me. I need to take a snapshot of this moment. I need to grab hold of this time. This is good. And I'll tell you, dear friends, there have been many times when I stood right here with you and thought the same thing about my life. I'm so grateful for this. But there are also days that will test every fiber of your being. Days that you don't really think will happen to you. And on those days, your foundation really will determine how you stand. Jesus says, if you take my teaching and you put it into practice, if you obey it, you will be firmly grounded. You'll be ready when the tough days come. But here's where we miss this, and this is huge for you to get. Many of us will hear what Jesus has to say, and we'll say, that's really good. But it'll be divorced from anything that we actually do. Now, we believe the gospel, and the gospel says that Jesus gives us a right standing with God that we could never earn by what he did, not by what we do. But when we belong to him, he says, I want you to do these things. I know how you're wired. I made you. And I want you to practice these things because these are the ways that you have the great life. This is what life was intended for you. We hear that, and many of us never get beyond a point of intellectual assent. And that's not the same thing as faith. I mean, you think about it. Jesus talked about character. He talked about morals. He talked about relationships. He talked about hopes, dreams, failures, successes. He talked about all those things. But if that stuff, those teachings, those instructions never get beyond the Wikipedia style of state in your mind, say, that's good information to file away someday. And it never results in you making choices and actions. Friends, that's not faith. It's not Christianity. Faith is that you trust Him so much that you give your life to Him, and then you listen to His instructions and put them into practice. I'll hear people say all the time, I go to church. Anybody can go to church, and I'm glad you're here. But it's not the same thing as anchoring your life on the foundation of Jesus. Many of you might say, I actually say my prayers, and they will be religious functions. That's not faith. That's not what we're talking about. Jesus invited us into a relational life with Him where we put into practice what He taught because we had trusted Him with our whole life. That's why when somebody says, I just can't do that. One of the questions I ask is, have you trusted Christ with your life? Well, not that part of it. Well, it's not a piecemeal deal. You don't carve it off and say, hey, I'm not going to give you that arm. I'm not going to give you this leg. I'm not going to give you this head. But you can have everything else. You don't say, I'll give you this time on Sunday, but you can't touch the rest of it. It doesn't work that way any more than a marriage or parenthood or any other relationship works. He wants you. And He wants you to trust Him so much that you put your whole life in His hands. And then He says, you put these things into practice and they will build a life. You practice them. I played a sport for 9 years. Many of you have played instruments for years. Dallas, you played horns for 30 years, 25 years? Played the piano for 40. I know we do scales and all those things, and you get used to doing those things. You practice. When I played football, we had drills that we did every single time we got together, whether it was before a game or before a practice or as a part of a practice. We did those drills all the time. There were some drills you did every single day. Did you ever wonder why? For years I thought that some of those were because my coaches were sadistic. They wanted to inflict pain, and they enjoyed it. And I think that really was true on some levels. But there was one we called then the sheep pen. Craig, y'all call that the sheep pen still? Or anyway, it was this exercise where you had 3 guys, and one would roll and the other one would roll over that one and back and forth, and you get up on your feet and go. And I kept wondering, is this just punishment or is this teaching us something real? Well, here's a clue. When you play football, you tend to get knocked down. Funny thing about collisions of human bodies, somebody falls down. And it's not that you fall down, it's whether you get back up and how fast you get up. In fact, the speed with which you regain your feet is the difference between making a tackle or watching the back numbers on somebody as they're streaking down the sideline. You are doing these drills, and you think about these things and you process these things all the time so that when the moment of testing comes, it has become instinctual instead of strange. Counselors will give skills to people coming to try to deal with certain things. When this happens, I want you to do this, and I want you to try this. I want you to practice this. Beth will take folks that are trying to learn how to talk again. She'll give them exercises. Physical therapists will give exercises, and you try those because they begin to build instinctive and natural behavior. That's why we read the scriptures. We want to know what Jesus is saying to us about life. That's why we pray to say, God, I want to hear from you. I want to make my heart soft and available to you. It's not religious behavior. It's a function of our trust of Him. So if you want a great life, you have to choose to make Jesus the foundation and all that He taught foundational to your life. Now, if you do that, it does not guarantee that you will not have pain, but it will change your life. And it will lay the foundation you need for a great life. Peter would say to the early church, give this challenge and this invitation. This is what he said. Come to Christ, who is the living cornerstone of God's temple. He was rejected by the people, but he's precious to God who chose him. Following him will not make you popular. Following him will not be a guarantee you'll never face pain. What it will do is you'll know that you are living the life that you were designed to live, and you're living as it was designed to be lived. You can have some confidence in that. You can lean on that. Even when you don't understand, you can say, God, this is what you told me to do. I am trusting you and I'm leaning on this. And second, you can know with every one of those steps, you will never be alone. You're not alone. I talked to a college student this week who was in his first days in the dorm. And one of the great struggles was he felt all alone. And he started talking about some of the things he's been dealing with. And I said, I remember that too. What? Yeah. I remember going through that. You're going to find there are a lot of other people who are going through that too. You are not alone. Jesus calls us and says, you come to me and you want to build a great life, great. You build it by anchoring your life in me, what I teach, what I tell you to do. Trust me enough to know that I'm not telling you something that's bad. I'm telling you how life is designed to work. And when you do, you will be connected to me and you will be marked for all eternity as a kingdom kid, as a grace kid. And you'll be loved to such an extent that no storm you ever face will be able to separate you from my love. Not cancer, not death, not job loss, not failing health, not betrayal by a friend. Nothing. No storm can tear you from the grip of his love. When I was 15, I moved to Lake Texoma. I grew up in Central Texas, and my dad took a job right before I started high school, and we moved to a little bitty town that was right at the base of Preston Point, jutting out into the lake. Lake Texoma is a fascinating place. It's a huge lake. It's one of the largest lakes in Texas. And it's surrounded by these sheer cliffs and bluffs, some of them 70, 80, 100 feet high. And you think, boy, those are really big cliffs. What you don't realize is they're actually 145, 150-foot cliffs, half of which are underwater. So I remember when we first moved to that lake and my dad took his boat out, we'd put the front of the boat against the rock. And on the back of the boat, 16 feet behind it, it would read 70 feet deep. It was a great place for cliff diving, great place for snorkeling and scuba diving. It was a wonderland to me as a kid. But when we went to look for housing, we came onto one of those more gentle slopes, one of those more gentle bluffs. And as we did, we saw it was kind of protecting a bay where Al would learn over the years to come had a wonderful, soft, sandy beach. And we would spend a lot of time there. I remember the very first day we drove into that place, we were with a realtor, and we looked around and there were concrete slabs kind of going down toward the water. And my dad asked the realtor, he said, Steve, are they building out here? He said, oh, no. That's where buildings once were. Really? What happened? I remember he pointed us, he said, look across the lake, and heading up northwest, you see that big, wide gap? Yeah, that's the river, and that basin goes all the way. It's 10 miles till you get to land. If you go straight that direction, it's 10 miles of open water. He said, most of the water you see is anywhere from 40 to 75 feet deep. And he said, when the storms come in the fall, and you've got those big, strong northers that come through, the ones that have the big embedded storms that have that big, heavy outflow boundary, and you go from having no wind to 70 miles an hour, 80 mile an hour winds. Every once in a while you have one that'll get to 90 miles an hour and sometimes clocked as high as 100. Those are rare, but they happen. And he said, those waves can get really big. I remember 2 instances where I was on that in a 17-foot boat and we were in 10-foot seas. Terrifying. He said that day, he said, we had a storm many, many years ago, and there were all these little stores that were on this. And you looked up, and there was a restroom facility. None of them had water. They were just buildings on flat slabs. And he said that storm came in, and the waves got 15, 18 feet high, and they began to wash up, and they just cleared the deck. And every place you see concrete was once a little building, about 400 square feet, 20 by 20. You know, when you have something, you're trying to remember something, you're trying to figure something out, and you've got this idea and it's not in your vision. It's like there's something just at your periphery and you just can't quite get it. There's an alarm going off in your heart and you know something's wrong, but you just can't quite grab it. That day messed with me all during high school. And after my second year of college, I remember going out that place and I finally realized what it was. We had built 2 houses. I knew what that looked like. But as you look, there was all this concrete, but there's not one single white pipe for plumbing. And there was not one single strand of rebar sticking up. Began to look on some of those slabs. And instead of having rebar every 18 inches or whatever, what you have in your houses, that stick up and they put the wood frame and they anchor it down so that thing has rigidity. You found a tack here, found another place here, another place here, another place here. And they'd put these very simple buildings on great foundations to which they never adequately anchored them. And so that storm came through, and it wasn't the foundation was bad. I saw them. They had been there for years, just sitting there, still. But they had never really connected those buildings with that good foundation. And friends, I will tell you this. I worry not about how faithful Jesus is or how dependable he is or what kind of resource he can be. I worry far more that we treat him at such a distance or so tangentially that we never anchor to him. And if you think that's what Christianity is, if you think that's what faith really looks like, I will simply tell you, friends, you have underestimated the potential of the relationship and you've probably given far too little of your heart to him to work with. And today, we're going to talk about all kinds of different aspects of that great life, but today is all about you making the most important choice, and that is choosing to anchor your life in the foundation of Jesus. Because friends, you can work at trying to be religious all you want, and you will find yourself frustrated and empty and hopeless, and you'll go, this isn't worth it, and it won't be. Because you have been religious, but you won't have been renovated. And a day will come for every one of us when the circumstances will be so heavy and you'll think, I go to church, I pray my prayers, but you'll never have given your life to him. And you'll find yourself washed away. And that foundation will be calling out to you as he did to Jerusalem so many centuries ago. Oh, I call to you. I wanted so desperately to gather you to myself like a mother hen gathers her chicks, but you wouldn't have it. You want a great life? You want a great life, you got to anchor it in the foundation of the Jesus who didn't just love you from a distance, but came and laid down his life for you. And when he says, if you hear this stuff and you ignore it, you're foolish. Your life is set to fail. But if you will anchor your life in me, you will withstand the worst that life throws to you. And I've also discovered it'll give you the ability to see when life has brought you its best. You want a great life? Do you? Then start by anchoring your life by faith in the Jesus who loved you. Because if you don't, if you won't, I'm not going to be able to tell you anything else that's helpful. I don't know any other answers. I don't know any other way. That's why when I go through the hardest days with believers and they say this to me, I don't have an answer for them. They will say consistently, Bruce, how do people without Christ get through this? And my answer is, I don't know. So today, some of you are here for the first time. Today, will you start a journey to say, Jesus, I want to anchor my life in you. And I want to put more than just a little bit of religious window dressing. I want to trust you. I'll trust you with my faith. I'll trust you with my obedience. And I'll trust you with my eternity. That choice is yours. Would you pray with me? Father, I always found it so encouraging to see that you came specifically to bring us a different kind of life. And you didn't describe it as skimpy or cheap or meaningless. You said the life you wanted us to experience was abundant, big, great. You wanted us to have hope that was unshakable. You wanted us to have relationships were defined by integrity. You wanted us to hold things lightly so we owned them. They didn't own us. You wanted us to treat each other with dignity and forgiveness. You wanted us to build character because that was the life you designed for us. But Father, the one thing that has been clear to me is that we cannot build that life without you. You're the one who made it possible through what you did on the cross. You're the one who gave us a window on what kingdom living would be like. You're the one who told us about a love that was unshakable. You're the one who revealed to us a hope that could get us through the worst days and bring great delight to the best of days. So, Father, today I pray for everyone in this room that each of us would make the decisive act of putting our trust in you. And Lord, I pray that in the days ahead, we'd see your Spirit growing in each of us as we trust you more and more each day. God, I thank you for this day, for the life you've given us. Give us eyes to see the opportunity. Give us wisdom to prepare for the hard days, that in the good and the bad, we might delight in you and find our meaning and our hope in you. For you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, and you are worthy of all of it. That we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for joining us for today's podcast. To find out more, visit us at www.fbcmidlothian.org. FBC Midlothian, where we're transforming our community one changed life at a time.